Hi, I'm Greg Munden from Munden Ventures in Kamloops. Thanks for tuning in today. Today we're talking about a blog that we've written on the driver shortage and more specifically the advantage that we think the log hauling industry has over other sectors of our industry. So by now, every sector of the trucking industry is feeling the effects of the often discussed driver shortage. In a recent survey conducted by Abacus, a shortage of drivers and the resulting idle equipment was the #1 issue cited by industry CEOs. And the issue is only projected to grow exponentially over the next several years, with the shortage nationally pushing through 38,000 drivers by 2024. You can read more about the driver shortage in our blog called 4 Reasons for the Truck Driver Shortage in BC and How to Fix It. Many industry leaders feel that elevating the status of professional driver to skilled, and maybe even rolling it into a Red Seal trade program or trade equivalent, is part of the answer to bringing back the pride, respect, and image of the industry. While getting to recognition as a skilled trade makes perfect sense, after all, there's no doubt that these are highly skilled jobs. Achieving this requires changes to the NOC code, which is the National Occupation Classification Code, which is only reviewed every 4 years. My family business is entering its 4th generation in the log hauling sector of the industry. I believe our sector has a significant competitive advantage within trucking to both attract and retain professional drivers, and here's why. We control way more of the driver experience. The single biggest advantage that the log hauling sector enjoys over the rest of the trucking industry is having direct control, or at least significant influence, over the entire driver experience. Most often there are only 2 or 3 parties who need to be actively involved in the daily driver experience. So the trucking company itself, the logging contractor, and the licensee or the sawmill or the owner of the timber that you're working for. If you think about the daily life of a driver, it can really be broken down into a few steps. Travel from home or the company terminal out to the forest for a load. Load from a logging contractor who typically has dedicated trucks with dedicated loading times. Number 3, travel accommodation of forestry or off-highway roads and public roadways to the sawmill or reload yard for unloading. Number 4, return for a second and then maybe a 3rd load that day. And finally, in most cases, return home at night. So influencing the elements that affect a log hauler's day only requires the motivation of a few people, and these people seldom change. Most often a log hauler hauls from the same logging contractor for weeks at a time, and sometimes for years. At worst, a log hauler with a seniority position or a contract with a mill may have to switch to another regular logging contractor within the system they normally haul anyways. Either way, there's likely only a few logging contractors normally involved in providing loads to the log hauler. The licensee typically, by contractual relationship, has a great deal of influence over how the logging contractor conducts himself, including how trucks and drivers are treated. The off-highway roads a log hauler is required to travel are most often built and maintained by a combination of the licensee, the logging contractor, and the Ministry of Forests. Once again, there are not a lot of parties involved when it comes to improving the working conditions of the professional log hauler. The licensee often owns the sawmill or reload yard that a log hauler needs to deliver his loads to. As such, it's the licensee's employees who are receiving the truck, the scalers, and who are responsible for unloading the truck. The licensee controls the hours of operation of the scale and staff, the level of service provided to trucking contractors, and how drivers are dealt with while on their work site. The licensee also determines other conditions of employment, including the rate of which the truck is paid and the allotted time to complete each load or the cycle time, which combined often go into the calculation of a driver's pay if the driver's paid by piecework or a percentage of what the truck makes, which is pretty common still in the industry. So as you can see, for much of the log hauler's day, the licensee has either control or significant influence. Contrasted to general trucking, the log hauling industry has drastically lower barriers to making changes within the system. In an environment of driver shortages, licensees have become increasingly motivated to improve the driver experience and, as demonstrated above, have the ability to do it. The logging industry has begun taking steps to identify the operational challenges facing drivers and their trucking contractors, including number one, length of workday. British Columbia licensees are actively considering reducing the targeted hours expected of log haulers. Although running under provincial hours of service exemptions in some provinces allowing up to 15 hours a day of work time, licensees are looking at reducing the target work hours to a more socially acceptable target. While this varies from licensee, an often discussed target of 12 hours per day is common. While this would not be a regulated hours of service change, the industry is looking at voluntary adoption of this to improve driver lifestyle, safety, attraction, and retention. Number two, start time. It has not been uncommon for log haulers to start at unconscionable hours of the day, or should I say morning. Drivers loading in the earliest loading positions may need to leave by 1 a.m. or earlier in order to ensure the entire truck lineup can make the deliveries before the sawmill closes. Many scales have moved to or are considering unmanned scale systems which allow trucks to arrive during a much broader window each day. Doing so allows contractors to adjust their starting time to allow for a later start. Number three, length of season. Historically, log hauling suffered from a very short productive season due to a number of factors, including spring breakup, where soft roads can make it impossible to haul off highway, fire season, which can be unpredictable, mill target inventory levels, which sometimes encourage sawmills to delay putting their trucking contractors back to work after breakup, and harvesting hauling costs, which can influence sawmills to focus more logging and hauling during the winter season, which can be less costly. In an effort to improve the reliability of the log hauler season, many sawmills have been focusing on opportunities to shorten the daily hour expectations discussed above in number one, while lengthening the season by decking wood out of the bush and into sort yards or reloads which have year-round access. Number four, road conditions. Certainly tied to the perception that the trucking industry can be unsafe, licensees are actively working with log haulers to identify needed improvements in the off-road systems that they control. This not only includes improving road maintenance, but also signage, design, etc. Number five, cycle times. Pressure related to unreasonable cycle times has often been cited in the sector as a source of risk, causing rushing and the feeling by the log haulers that they may not get paid for the entire time it takes to do their job. Many sawmills have encouraged or even funded the early adoption of ELDs, or electronic logbooks, and other onboard telematics systems. You can read our blog called An Unbiased Guide to ELD Implementation for Trucking Companies, and using this information to establish reasonable and achievable cycle times at reasonable segment speeds. Next, I want to talk about the professional designation and recognition. Recognized as a significant barrier to attracting new people to the industry is crediting drivers with skill it takes to be a professional driver is an important factor in the lack of pride that people associate with careers as professional drivers, and the lack of respect the profession receives from the families, friends, and peers of people considering a career as a driver. At least in BC, the industry is making great strides to change both this perception as well as the training and accreditation that goes into becoming a professional log hauler. The Professional Log Hauler Training Program has been developed by a group of industry veterans and rolled into a comprehensive competency-based training program involving both academic and on-the-job mentor-led training. Successfully completing the program involves passing a third-party independent assessment, which results in receiving a professional log hauler endorsement. Already, sawmills across the province are creating programs to encourage even existing drivers undergo the independent assessment portion and received the professional endorsement. Read more about our experience with the professional log hauler training program with our blog on that subject. The training program also creates the opportunity to develop the next generation of professional log hauler, whether that's millennials, existing drivers engaged in general trucking, or mature workers contemplating a career change. Professional log hauling is positioning itself as something for people in all walks of life to seriously consider. And really, log hauling is the elite professional driving career. Oftentimes, prospects are unclear what career paths exist in professional driving. Once again, log hauling has the opportunity to stand out amongst the crowd of driving jobs as the pinnacle of professional driving. After all, the professional log hauler already commonly enjoys one of the highest rates of pay. Many can make in excess of $100,000 per year plus benefits if they're working for a good company. Demands the highest level of driving skill and affords one of the potentially best work-life balances in the trade. A licensee and contractor group motivated to continue improving these conditions only enhances the position of the professional log hauler as the obvious driving position of choice and one for people to strive for. As a sector, part of the solution is simply articulating this good news story, demonstrating to people considering trucking the opportunity to progress through entry-level driving positions to ultimately reach the top as a professional log hauler, providing a clearer picture of the great opportunities to create a career in trucking. Thanks for joining me in this blog. I hope you take the time to read our others. Have a great day.